إن الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده. قد قال تبارك وتعالى في كلامه المجيد والفرقان الحميد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا ونبينا وشفيعنا وحبيبنا وسندنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم. وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم: من صلى علي صلاة واحدة صلى الله عليه بها عشرة، وكما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام: سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العزيز الحكيم. رب زدني علما، رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Alhamdulillah, we are restarting our series on the 10 Promised Jannah. That so far we have covered the Khulafa al-Rashidun, the four Khalif, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala an, Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu ta'ala an, Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan radiyallahu ta'ala an, and Sayyidina Ali karramallahu wajhahu. And then after that, we last spoke about Sayyidina Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah radiyallahu ta'ala an. So we've covered 5 companions to date. There are 5 left from the Ashara Mubashara. The next, as been advertised, sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala an, that we're going to discuss is Sayyidina Talha Ibn Ubaidullah radiyallahu ta'ala an. And again, there are a few reasons why we are doing this. Number one is obviously to increase our knowledge of the Sahaba Kiram Ridwanullahi ta'ala majma'een. And when we learn of their sifat and their qualities, inshaAllah, we endeavor to embed them in our own lives as they nurtured and harbored qualities that were beneficial from the perspective of the deen. That's why the Prophet ﷺ emphasized that holding on to their tradition after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. So, Sayyiduna Talha Ibn Ubaidullah radiyallahu ta'ala an, his full name is Talha Ibn Ubaidullah Ibn Uthman Ibn Amr Ibn Ka'b Ibn Taym Ibn Murra Ibn Ka'b Ibn Luway Ibn Ghalib Ibn Fihr Ibn Malik Ibn Kanana, until the Prophet ﷺ's lineage is established. So Sayyidina Talha ibn Ubaidullah, his lineage meets with the Prophet ﷺ's ancestral line in the 6th or 7th generation with Ka'b ibn Murra. And so in the ascendancy, like many of the Sahaba Kiram Ridwanullahi Tajma'een, their ascendancy meets with the Prophet ﷺ. He belonged to a tribe from the Quraysh known as Banu Taym. So the Prophet ﷺ is Banu Hashim, and Sayyidina Talha ibn Ubaidullah radiyallahu ta'ala an, his tribe is Banu Taym. If we remember, there was another companion that we discussed who's also from Banu Taym, and that is Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala. So Sayyidina Abu Bakr ibn Siddiq, his name is Abdullah ibn Uthman. So where Talha is the son of Ubaidullah, the son of Uthman, Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala is the son of Uthman. So he is the second cousin of Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala. Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala is also from Banu Taym, and that makes him a cousin of Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala. And as we saw in the discussion of Abu Bakr radiyallahu ta'ala an, Banu Taym in general, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed many of them with wealth. And so Talha radiyallahu ta'ala also, inshallah, when we go into detail, some of the numbers, when you sort of look at it from the perspective of today, are mind-blowing. What Talha radiyallahu ta'ala was what you could call a serial entrepreneur and a very, very, very established businessman. In fact, anything Talha radiallahu ta'ala anhu touched in terms of business, he made immense profit from. I'm digressing. I was going to go in stages, but I remember that initially Talha radiallahu ta'ala anhu was in trade. So he would buy and sell, travel different lands, and when he would come up, when he would go to these, apologies, I didn't start the, when he would travel to these lands, he would then barter, and many of the Quraysh were dependent on his trade. What's very interesting is Talha radiallahu ta'ala anhu started his profession of trade at the age of maybe 12, 13, very young. So initially he was into buying and selling different commodities, and he would bring them back to Makkah al-Mukarramah. So he is born in Makkah al-Mukarramah, and many of the Quraysh would depend. In fact, one of the reasons why he wasn't publicly tortured after his Islam is because they were so dependent on his trade. He used to bring back so much. So I was mentioning that later on, after he migrated to Medina al-Munawwara, for some time he still did buying and selling, and then he got into land, agricultural land. Talha radiallahu ta'ala anhu himself, he states that a point came where Talha radiallahu ta'ala anhu was making, in terms of average daily sales, he was making an approximate amount of 1,000 dinars a day. Sorry, I've just got to, this has not come up and people are complaining. Apologies. And we'll get back to this immediately, inshallah. Start the event. Okay, alhamdulillah. I think we're live now. There we are. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so Sayyidina Talha radiallahu ta'ala an, his daily average trade was 1,000 dinars. And you may say, well, what's 1,000 dinars? So let me put that into perspective. In those days, a dirham was the commodity that was used to barter in terms of silver. And dinar was a commodity that was used to barter in gold. So dinar represented gold. It was made of gold. And the equivalency of that in today's day and age, that 1 dinar in weight of gold was approximately 4.25 grams of gold. 1 gram of gold today is approximately 51 pounds. So 1 dinar is worth over 216 pounds. 216 pounds is 1 dinar. 1,000 dinars means that his daily average income, what he was bringing in, was over 216,000 pounds. 216,000 pounds a day. Allah had blessed him immensely in terms of trade. Allah had given him a unique concept of being able to see profit. But what you will see, inshallah, when we discuss in a bit more detail, though this amount of wealth was coming to Talha radiallahu ta'ala, he had absolutely zero inclination to wealth. So he was making a bucket load of money, but that money had no effect on Talha radiallahu ta'ala. To the point that when he would make huge profits, a panic and worry would set into him. That what do I do with this? Once, he says himself, I had some transactions and the profit of that, and I've not even gone into taking into today's amount, the profit of that in dinars was 700,000 dinars. So again, you can imagine the numbers here. So on one transaction, I made 700,000 dinars. He said, I got home And I said to myself, what am I going to do with this? So I'm sitting there, I'm sitting, and I'm crossing my head. What do I do with it? Because by morning time I decided that every single dinar I had then given away in charity to different people. 700 by night, 0 left by morning. Sorry, not 700, 700,000 dinars in the evening. By morning, not a single one was with him. He distributed all of that in charity. So when I said he had an immense amount of wealth, now that I've started, I'll just finish off this topic. Amir Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala, after the golden era, Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala, who led the Muslims for a while. He said, I once asked the son of Talha radiallahu ta'ala, Musa, that your father, Talha radiallahu ta'ala, had approximately 11 to 13, if I can remember correctly, 10 to 13 children. So he said, I asked this one, that your father was extremely good in business, but he was also very charitable. So what did he leave for you when he passed away? Because inheritance is distributed. So this is only one son. So his son responded that from all the different things that my father left and we inherited, so there was property, there was land, there was animals, there was actual gold coins other than dinars and silver, but just the dinars that came into my possession. The dinars that came into this is one boy from there were approximately 8 other boys. I inherited, alongside everything else, 200,000 dinars. The value of that is over 43 million pounds. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed Sayyidina Talha radiallahu ta'ala. And the point isn't to exaggerate wealth and say, look, Allah gave him a lot. It's the fact that that wealth had 0 impact on his perspective of life. Once he was married to, subhanAllah, he has a unique, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed Talha radiallahu ta'ala with unique spouses as well. He was married to 4 sister-in-laws of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Prophet ﷺ had married the daughter of Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, Aisha radiallahu ta'ala. He was married to the sister of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala, Kulthum. The Prophet ﷺ married Zainab bint Jahash radiallahu ta'ala anha. Talha radiallahu ta'ala was married to the sister of Zainab, Hamna bint Jahash radiallahu ta'ala. Also one of the daughters of Banu Umayyah, the Prophet ﷺ was married to Salma radiallahu ta'ala. He was married to the sister of Salma radiallahu ta'ala. And also the daughter Habiba bint Abi Sufyan radiallahu ta'ala, the Prophet ﷺ was married to. Sayyidina Talha radiallahu ta'ala was married to the sister of that, Fara'ya bint Abi Sufyan. So he was married to 4 of the sister-in-laws of the Prophet ﷺ as well. So once he was with, and there was, generally it's understood that he was with the daughter of Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, Kulthum, the sister of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala. And so he came home with this same panic that Allah has blessed me with a transaction, 300,000 dirhams that I've come into possession of. Dinars, sorry, not dirhams. Gold, dinar. What do I do with it? So she sees him and he's in anxiety. There's worry on his face. So Kulthum radiallahu ta'ala asked that, why are you so panicked and worried? He said, this is what's happened. Allah has blessed me with this. What do I do with it? So she said, give it away in charity. Look at the mizaj, look at the temperament of both the husband and the wife. The wife doesn't turn around and say, 300,000 dinars profit. I know what we can do with it. No. She says, give it away in charity. So you know who he calls? He calls a slave girl. The slave girl that worked in the house, and said, here is 300,000 to be distributed amongst your family. Allahu Akbar. What a unique individual that Allah had blessed, but the world didn't taint him at all. Despite having, like I said, to leave one son from the inheritors that are up to 13, and not considering the property and the land, just gold ashrafiyah dinars, the equivalent of 43 million pounds. Yet him, when any wealth comes to him, all he thinks is where I can give in charity. They say that the Sahaba Kiram, they say that the two individuals that Allah had blessed immensely was Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu ta'ala and one was Talha Ibn Ubaidullah radiallahu ta'ala. Immense wealth. Khair. So as I mentioned, that he was from Banu Taym, and Banu Taym were prolific in business. And Allah kept this throughout his life. Right until he passed away, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed him with wealth. So Sayyidina Talha radiallahu ta'ala an, as I said, he was a serial entrepreneur. He was doing business from a very tender age, extremely young age. And the historians, they write that Sayyidina Talha radiallahu ta'ala was born approximately 24 or 25 years prior to the Hijrah. That means that he was born when the Prophet ﷺ was around 28, 29 years old, around that age. And 11 years later, the Prophet ﷺ was given prophethood. So this narrative, or this indication from this perspective of history says that Sayyidina Talha radiallahu ta'ala was 11 years old when the Prophet ﷺ declared Islam, or was given nubuwwah. Sorry, he declared publicly 4 years later. So Sayyidina Talha was in it. Another narration mentions that the day the Prophet ﷺ declared prophethood, Sayyidina Talha was 18. So between the age of 15 and 18 was the first time that Sayyidina Talha radiallahu ta'ala heard what Islam was. And guess where Talha radiallahu ta'ala was when he heard about Islam? On a business journey. He was doing business. So at that young age, he had traveled to Syria. And in Syria, he is doing business amongst the caravans that do business, and he overhears a monk, a Syrian monk. And the monk is saying, is anybody here from Ahlul Haram, from the place of the Haram, from the people of the Haram? So he's going to one caravan after the other, and Sayyidina Talha radiallahu ta'ala, he hears it, says, yes, I'm from the Haram. So he says, has the person declared what he's meant to declare? Sayyidina Talha radiallahu ta'ala says, what are you talking about? He goes, has Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam declared that he is the Prophet of Allah? This is, what do you mean? So again, he's been on a business journey. He doesn't know what's happening in Makkah al-Mukarramah. So he says, yes, the final prophet has arrived. He's declared his prophethood. And the monk says to him, don't let this opportunity slide by you. Don't be amongst those that reject. So he says, I don't know what you're on about. I have no idea what you're talking about. So he says, I wrapped up my business. This really, it struck something in me. That what is this person that he's speaking about? What is he calling to a God? We know many gods in the Haram. So he wrapped up his business and he came straight back. So as I came back and I started asking people, what is the big news that it's being talked about all the way in Syria, in Sham? So they said, yes. Tanabba'a Muhammad ibn Abdullah. Muhammad, the son of Abdullah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, has declared that he is a prophet of Allah. So, Sayyidina Talha radiallahu ta'ala said, who's joined him? Who's joined him? So they said, your cousin, Abdullah ibn Abi Quhafa. Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, he has joined Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So he says to himself, Abu Bakr radiallahu is very clever. Abu Bakr knows what he's doing. So before he goes to the Prophet ﷺ, he goes to Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala. And he says to Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, what is this rumor that I'm hearing, that you have accepted the religion of this person? So again, now we're reflecting. How old is this individual? Based on the different narrations, either 15 or 18. Very young. He's not a contemporary in age of the Prophet ﷺ. He's young. But he sees something in terms of truthfulness. So he asks Abu Bakr, what is this? He says, yes, I have accepted Islam. So again, this is when the Prophet ﷺ has publicly declared Islam, not at the beginning of Islam. As I mentioned, for 3 years, Islam was practiced in secrecy. Only a few people. And then the call came that go in, announce to the people. So it's at this point, in the 4th year of Nubuwwah. So he starts to listen to Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala. The words make sense. The call makes sense. And Abu Bakr says, come with me. He takes hold of Talha radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and he takes him to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he comes in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam gives him the da'wah. He listens to the da'wah and he accepts Islam. He says, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa annaka Rasulullah. But again, this junction is not the junction of secrecy anymore. Up until the declaration of the Prophet ﷺ, Islam was hidden. It wasn't made public. The Prophet ﷺ's nubuwwah wasn't made public. So Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu is now documenting Islam to people. Those who have accepted Islam are documenting Islam in front of people, publicizing it. Talha does the same. Young person from a family of wealth, who has everything that you can imagine. Everything. He now is in that situation where he's declaring and he knows the consequences of that. We have already gone over many a times that what happened to the early Muslims. And just on that, a caveat. He says, I was one of, or the 8th person to accept Islam. One of the first 8 or the 8th. That's the 2 narrations that we find. And he is amongst the 5 that accepted on the hand of Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala's da'wah. So because of the propagation of Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala, he accepted Islam. What happens when he accepts Islam? 2 narrations are mentioned. Well, pretty much he's persecuted, but because of his business, it's not done openly. It's done behind closed doors. On occasion, the anger gets to the point where it's done publicly as well. One individual, he mentions that I was on the Mount of Safa. They used to worship even on the Mount of Safa, those that didn't believe in the oneness of Allah. The haram was sacred for everybody. So he says, I see a young man, his hands tied behind him, and he's running. And there are people chasing him and hitting him, slapping him on his head. And just behind the people is a woman with a whip. And she's lashing out at him at every opportunity. So as this guy is going by, I can't see him properly, so I stop one of the people that's actually hitting him and said, who is this? It was, that's Talha. So I said, what's he done? He's accepted Islam. And that's his family. And that's his friends that are not tolerating the fact that he's accepted Islam. So it was fine, I understand. Who's that woman? It was his mother, Sahaba. She later, alhamdulillah, became a Muslim. She lived until over the age of 80. She saw the martyrdom of Uthman radiallahu ta'ala. But in initial Islam, she was very harsh against her son. They would beat, and because it wasn't acceptable to accept the truth. So his father, Talha Ibn Ubaidullah. So Ubaidullah, the historians, they say that he passed away before the Prophet ﷺ declared nubuwwah. So he was from a different, he wasn't responsible in the same sense that everybody else was. But his mother, initially she rejected. From those that hurt him the most severely, and you find 2 narrations. One is Nawfal ibn Khuwaylid, and the second is Uthman ibn Ubaidullah. Nawfal ibn Khuwaylid is the brother of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala. And he was so staunch against Islam. When he heard that the Prophet ﷺ accepted Islam, anyone that he had contact with, he was extremely harsh against them if they accepted Islam. So the brother of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala. And the second, which is mentioned in the books of history, is an individual by the name of Uthman ibn Ubaidullah. Ubaidullah being the same Ubaidullah who's the father of Talha, meaning Uthman is the brother of Talha. So just like his mother, the brother was extremely harsh. How harsh? There's an incident that's recorded that these 2 cousins, Abu Bakr and Talha radiallahu ta'ala, for the displeasure of them accepting Islam, Uthman or Nawfal, one of the 2, tied them together and tied them so tight that you're not allowed to go pray, you're not allowed to do any worship, and he continuously beat them. And when he got tired, he called his friends, he called his family members. And that's why one of the nicknames that's given to Talha and Abu Bakr is Qareenain. Qareen means close friend. As you're tied, you're close together. So Qareenain, they were known as because these were the two that were tied and beaten because of the fact that they had accepted Islam. So in early Islam, it was difficult for Talha radiallahu ta'ala. But it wasn't as difficult in comparison to those who didn't have. So those that didn't have, the likes of Sayyidina Sumayya, Sayyidina Khubayb, Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu ta'ala, they were tortured publicly and in private. On occasions, these other individuals with wealth were publicly tortured, but generally in private. So this was early Islam. He was unable, because again, he was out on business to do the hijrah. When the hijrah time came, he wasn't there. He was out on business. The Quraysh were still dependent on him bringing back money. And his relationships from all the Sahaba, one of the closest in the time of Makkah was with Zubayr ibn al-Awwam radiyallahu ta'ala. It's mentioned in the books of history that the Prophet ﷺ, just like he made a partnership of Sahaba in Medina al-Munawwara, in early Islam he made a partnership of Sahaba in Makkah al-Mukarramah as well. The partner of Talha radiallahu ta'ala in Makkah al-Mukarramah, Mu'akhad, the brother, was Sayyidina Zubayr ibn al-Awwam radiallahu ta'ala. He's also one of the Ashara Mubashara who we'll speak about at a later date. And the brother that he was made to become Mu'akhad between in Medina al-Munawwara was Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiallahu ta'ala. So these were the two real close brothers of Sayyidina Talha radiallahu ta'ala. So Sayyidina Talha radiallahu ta'ala, he is determined to stay on the deen irrespective of what happened to him. And there was some form of leniency shown towards him because of what he was able to bring back to the Quraysh. Talha radiallahu ta'ala has extreme virtues mentioned by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One of them is why we're discussing him. He's from the 10 Promised Jannah. In another hadith, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is recorded by Imam Tirmidhi rahimahullah in his Sunan, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Zubayr wa Talha jaraya fil Jannah. Zubayr and Talha are my neighbors in Jannah. These two individuals will be my neighbors in Jannah. So this is, to understand that this is a lofty statement. The Prophet ﷺ is declaring that from the inhabitants of Jannah, the ones who will be closest to me, my neighbors, two of them are Sayyidina Talha Ibn Ubaidullah and Sayyidina Zubayr ibn al-Awwam. The Prophet ﷺ, Talha radiallahu ta'ala, he said, the Prophet ﷺ gave me a few nicknames, a few titles. Talhatul Khayr, Talhatul Fayyad, and Talhatul Jood. On the occasion of Uhud, the Prophet ﷺ titled me Talhatul Khayr. On the occasion of Yawm al-Usra, when the Romans were preempting their attack after the Treaty of Hudaybiyah and the conquest of Makkah, the Prophet ﷺ named me Talhatul Fayyad, the one who gives very generously. And on the occasion of Hunayn, the Prophet ﷺ titled me Talhatul Jood, again the generous Talha. So the Prophet ﷺ has clearly mentioned certain virtues of Talha radiallahu ta'ala. He's declared him a person who is entering into Jannah. He's declared him not only one who is admittant or going to be given admittance into paradise, but he has titled him as a neighbor of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Jannah. So what are some of the accounts of Talha radiallahu ta'ala that we can look at and learn from? And I'm conscious of time, inshallah, so we're going to go straight into them. From the life of Talha radiallahu ta'ala, we'll find a few aspects that are very noteworthy to look upon and see that this was a hallmark and a legacy of Talha radiallahu ta'ala. One of them was his dedication to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Extremely enamored in terms of his respect and love for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the climax of that was the Battle of Uhud. So Talha radiallahu ta'ala anhu participated in all the battles. Now someone will say, well, he wasn't present in Badr. He wasn't present in Badr. But that's because the Prophet ﷺ had actually sent him on an expedition pre-Badr. The Prophet ﷺ, he wanted to target the caravans of Abu Sufyan. And Abu Sufyan had taken his caravans towards Sham. So he sent, the Prophet ﷺ sent Talha radiallahu ta'ala and Sayyidina Sa'id bin Zayd, another of the 10 of Promised Jannah, to go and see where are these caravans, come back to us, and then we can go and attack them. Take back our wealth that they have usurped from us. So whilst Sayyidina Talha radiallahu ta'ala is doing the scouting, Abu Sufyan has already learnt that I'm being targeted, and he's come back and the Battle of Badr takes place. Talha radiallahu ta'ala along with Sayyid bin Zayd come back to the Prophet and say, Ya Rasulullah, we missed the battle. We missed the actual battle. So the Prophet ﷺ said, don't worry. Laka sahmuk. You have your sort of share of the bounty from the war booty. You've missed the battle, but you have your share of the booty. Talha radiallahu ta'ala says, Wal ajr, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. The Prophet ﷺ says to him, don't worry, you've missed out on the war booty, but I've kept it aside. From the spoils of war, your share is there. Talha radiallahu ta'ala says, I'm not worried about the spoils of war. Ya Rasulullah, wal ajr, will I get the reward of the Battle of Badr? The Prophet ﷺ says, walak al ajr, that you have the reward as well. So though physically not there, because the Prophet ﷺ had sent him, he was given a share of these spoils, and he was given the promise of the thawab as well by Rasulullah ﷺ. So though technically or physically he wasn't present, technically, according to the Prophet ﷺ, he was there and he is included in the reward of the Battle of Badr. But where does his display of love for the Prophet ﷺ reach its peak? In the Battle of Uhud. We all know that in the Battle of Uhud, there were different scenarios that played out. There was initially victory, which then seemed to turn towards loss, which then came back towards victory. But it's that period of perceived loss where you see a courageous Talha radiallahu ta'ala. Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he used to speak about the Battle of Uhud, he used to say, the day of Uhud belongs to Talha. The day of Uhud belongs to Talha. Umar radiallahu ta'ala used to refer to Talha radiallahu ta'ala as Sahibu Uhud, the person of Uhud. Why? So when we spoke in our last conversation, we spoke about Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah. And I mentioned how there was an occasion where Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah and Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala were at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam after he was wounded, and they tended to him and they circled him and they protected him. But there's something that happened before that. So in this fray, in this sort of complete chaos, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is being attacked, the Sahaba have moved, or some of them have moved out of their places, and they are flanked and they are attacked. There comes a point where only 10 or 12 individuals are stood with the Prophet ﷺ. And the focus of the Quraysh that are attacking is directly towards the Prophet ﷺ. So the Prophet ﷺ sees that there's an oncoming threat. And he says, Man lil qawm? Who will defend and take on these people? Talha says, Ana. He says, Talha, you sit, you wait. And he picks another Sahabi and says, you go. The Sahaba stands, engages, and he is chopped down and killed. The Prophet ﷺ says, Man lil qawm? Talha says, Ana. The Prophet ﷺ says, wait, not yet. Second Sahabi, same fate. The Prophet ﷺ says, Man lil qawm? Talha says, Ana. One by one, each time the Prophet ﷺ says, no, Talha, not yet. When there is nobody left, the Prophet ﷺ says, Al-an ya Talha. Now Talha. So Talha radiallahu ta'ala now stands to defend the Prophet ﷺ. As I've mentioned, one companion after the other has been slaughtered. He's now stood by himself, and he's facing an enemy of not one, many that are attacking. The only thing on the mind of Talha radiallahu ta'ala an is, how do I protect the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam? To what extent? The Sahaba Kiram Ridwan Tajma'in who narrate the hadith, and Talha himself afterwards say that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he is the primary objective, they don't care who else they kill. The real focus is the assassination of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is being attacked by sword, he's being attacked by arrows, he's being attacked by spears. And they're coming from all different directions. And I'm the only one that's in between them and the Prophet ﷺ. So as a spear comes and it's in a place that I put my body towards that, and I block the spear with that part of my body. Then from the opposite direction, where there's an arrow that's coming, I quickly reach out with my hand or with my leg and I stop that from hitting the Prophet ﷺ. After a few people try to strike and I protect, I quickly pick up the sword and push them back. Give the Prophet ﷺ some comfort. Then they gather and come a second time. And I quickly push them back. A third time, a fourth, and this carries on. To the point where I have taken, at one point they come near to the Prophet ﷺ and they attack with a sword, and I see that I have nothing left, so I put my hand and my fingers are chopped off. His fingers are chopped off. But I still managed to prevent the sword hitting the Prophet ﷺ, and I pushed them back. Eventually others come, like Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah and Sayyidina Abu Bakr. But before this happens, I've pushed them so back that I've given them respite I've given the Prophet ﷺ respite from them. And I then take the Messenger ﷺ, who was hit, as I mentioned, he was attacked, and the Prophet ﷺ's cheek area, the male qaif went into it. So he says, as the Prophet ﷺ is injured, I see that there's a boulder, a stone. So I take the Prophet ﷺ towards that so that he can ascend that. One of the primary reasons for that is so the rest of the Sahaba can see that he's still alive, because that rumor had spread that the Prophet ﷺ has passed away. The Prophet ﷺ was wearing two different forms of armor to protect himself. So when he got to that boulder, he was unable to, he tried, but he couldn't climb up. So Talha radiallahu ta'ala gets down on his knees, injured completely, and he provides his back for the Prophet ﷺ to climb upon. The Prophet ﷺ puts his feet on the back of Talha radiallahu ta'ala and climbs the stone. And he makes a comment then, that when this occurs and the Prophet ﷺ is able to then stand on the boulder to show the rest of the Sahaba that he's still there, the Prophet ﷺ said, أوجب Talha. Talha has made Jannah wajib for him. That he is going to Jannah. Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he says that when the Prophet ﷺ is on the boulder, he's been attacked this many times, he's completely exhausted, he falls over. He's on his side. So me, Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, are one of the first two that come to the Prophet ﷺ after this. We reach the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We see him standing on this boulder. We reach him, and the Prophet ﷺ addresses us. He says, go to your companion. He's in more need than I am. Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala says, we found Talha radiallahu ta'ala an with over 70 wounds. Over 70 wounds. His daughter, she says, from those wounds, 20 to 24 of them never healed. They never healed. He continuously walked with a limp until he passed away. And from those wounds, there were actual stab wounds, there were the removal of limbs, like his fingers. But irrespective of the condition that he was in, he didn't move an inch from the Prophet ﷺ. He gave himself, that's probably the incident where you can say someone gave themselves as, on their behalf, a human shield. He became a human shield for the Messenger ﷺ. So this was the incident where the Prophet ﷺ said, "Awjaba Talha." Talha has made paradise mandatory upon him. So Talha radiallahu anhu says, on that occasion, the Prophet ﷺ referred to me and said to me, Talha al-Khayr. The title was Talha al-Khayr. Talha, the person of good, the one who gave himself up for the Messenger ﷺ. And this legacy of Uhud is, any time you read anything about Talha radiallahu ta'ala, this is a discussion that takes place, a conversation that takes place. That when, for whatever reason, everybody else was away from the Messenger ﷺ, the one individual who kept presenting himself to defend the Messenger ﷺ was Sayyidina Talha radiallahu ta'ala. On occasion after occasion, to the point that he couldn't do it anymore, and after he gave the Prophet ﷺ the respite to climb the boulder on the mount, Talha radiallahu ta'ala, exhausted, fell over. Couldn't carry on. Also, as I mentioned, that all of these companions, alongside their legacies, you'll find something from their akhlaq, from their personality that mind-blowing. I'm just going to draw attention to one account. Again, time, so I'm just going to mention this and then we'll conclude, inshallah. Talha radiallahu ta'ala, he possessed a quality that many of us lack. Many of us lack. And it involves others and not just yourself. So it's a selfless act. That from the qualities of Talha, we learned already that he was extremely generous. He would give. Banu Taym, any widow in his tribe, he looked after their affairs. Any orphan, he looked after their affairs. Anyone who was destitute in need, he looked after their affairs. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala would be given yearly 10,000 dinars from him after the Prophet ﷺ passed away. He would spend excessively on others. Again, don't think of 10,000 as 10,000 pounds. This is, like I said, when you do the equation, this is a huge amount of money. But one quality he possessed, and he doesn't speak about it. Ubay bin Ka'b radiallahu ta'ala. We have all heard the incident of the Battle of Tabuk, in which the Prophet ﷺ had made a declaration that everybody has to go out. And Allah speaks about three individuals, وَعَلَى الثَّلَاثَةِ الَّذِينَ خُلِّفُوا, the three that stayed behind. And Ubay bin Ka'b being one of them. And he said, I didn't stay behind because I was injured. I didn't stay behind because I didn't respect the call by the Messenger ﷺ. I stayed behind because of procrastination. I told myself, I'll do the preparation tomorrow and then I'll go. Tomorrow came and I said, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll meet them up. I've got fast horses, etc. By the time I decided to go, the battle was finished and they were coming back. Allah speaks about this in the Holy Quran. وَعَلَى الثَّلَاثَةِ الَّذِينَ خُلِّفُوا, and with respect to the three that stayed behind. حَتَّى إِذَا ضَاقَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ الْأَرْضُ بِمَا رَحْبَتْ وَضَاقَ عَلَيْهِمْ أَنفُسُهُمْ وَظَنُّوا أَنْ لَا مَلْجَأَ مِنَ اللَّهِ إِلَّا إِلَيْهِ. Very long story, I'm not going to go into it. In which there was a boycott that the Prophet ﷺ then declared upon these three people. Do not talk to them. Do not associate with them. They would, he said, imagine that Ubay radiallahu ta'ala, he said, how difficult this must have been. That when the boycott was declared, the rest of the Muslims shunned me. They wouldn't speak to me. I would come to the masjid. I would pass by companions that I knew. I would say Assalamu alaikum. They wouldn't respond. They wouldn't say anything. This was the directive of the Messenger ﷺ, that until Allah doesn't declare that they are guilty or innocent, I have nothing to do with them. Imagine how difficult that was on Ubay. And he said, his own wife then sought permission from the Messenger ﷺ. Ya Rasulullah, I have, as you have instructed, I do not communicate with him, but can I give him his food, etc. and do that much? This is the extent of the boycott that took place. So Ubay radiallahu anhu, he says, none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered to me from this boycott was, what was the Prophet ﷺ thinking? What was, so, that is he upset with me? And so he says that I would come to the masjid, offer my prayers, and I would say Assalamu alaikum loud enough that others could hear, but the Messenger ﷺ could hear as well. And I would look. Where would I look? Find the Prophet ﷺ doesn't audibly say wa alaikum assalam, but does his lips move or not? Does he move his lips to say wa alaikum assalam? That's the extent of the pain that he was feeling. So, cutting a long story short, the eventuality after a very long period was Allah declared their innocence in the Quran. He says, someone came to provide this information to me. When the information was given to me, I rushed to the masjid to go to the Prophet ﷺ. He says, I entered the masjid. The ayah has been revealed. It has been declared to everybody. The sahaba are all sitting there. I'm approaching the Messenger ﷺ. And there's one individual who stands up. So from the rest of the sahaba, one individual from the muhajirun, the ones who migrated, so from the early Meccans, all of them remain seated. One stands up and he rushes towards me. And after coming to me, he greets me, he congratulates me. And that is Talha radiallahu anhu. So what is the quality that he possesses? He loved to see good happen to others. It made him happy that others became happy. This had nothing to do, this incident in the Bara'at had nothing to do with Talha. Talha didn't receive innocence from Allah because he wasn't guilty of anything in the first place. So it was nothing for him to be overtly joyous about, but he said he couldn't even stay seated. When the innocence came down, when Allah declared that you are innocent, Ubay, and the other two with you, Talha, when he saw me, he was extremely happy with that. Meaning, the quality that he possessed, which we don't have this, is we can't see good happen to others. He craved this. He desired this. He wanted good to happen to others. When we read this story, we reflect on Ubay radiallahu anhu. Most people, they miss out. That there is a huge lesson. A huge lesson. That believers are those who enjoy the good of others. They don't feel bad because of it. That's not Iman. Allah taught us a very valuable lesson. That when something good happens to others, it should make you happy. Ubay bin Ka'b radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when this happened, he said, at that point, I said to myself, I can never forget what Talha did. It wasn't his occasion. There was nothing for him. Why was he happy? What made him joyous? He possessed that sifat and that quality. That seeing others happy, seeing the prosperity of others was something that brought him joy. It's why he was generous. It's why he was generous. Because from his generosity, he brought happiness to others. That made him happy. Allah blessed him with immense wealth. Immense wealth. Numbers that we can't imagine. Like I said, I don't want to be repetitive, but one son to inherit from everything else, just the dinars, equivalent to 43 million pounds today. Giving away on one occasion alone, 700,000 dinars, golden dinars. That's more than the 43 million, understand that. That was 200,000. 43 million is 200,000 dinars. This is 700,000 dinars. Almost 4 times that amount. Almost 160 million pounds. And as soon as he gets it, the morning doesn't come, but he's given it to others. Why? Because the prosperity of others brings him joy. And it brings me to that. We spoke about the legacy of his love for the Prophet ﷺ, but this is an extremely valuable lesson. That Islam teaches us that when others are blessed by Allah, it should make us happy. We're so driven by material. We're so driven by me having and I having, that if Allah gives somebody else, forget about being happy for them, we feel bad. There is a pain that comes in us that why has Allah given him and not given me? That's how far we are from the deen. Allah blesses a second person. Instead of the Islamic spirit of saying, Alhamdulillah, Allah has blessed you, we in our minds were like sweating that why has he gotten it? Why has Allah blessed that person? That's our iman. We can't even tolerate somebody else's success. And the cogs start spinning. Oh, this guy must, you hear the most absurd things. How did he make money? Is he a drug dealer? SubhanAllah, you just think to yourself, how desperate are we for the ni'mah of others? That if somebody else Allah blesses with, then we have to give a negative spin to that. They must have it because they've done this wrong. It's not your wealth, it's Allah's wealth. Why are you bothered about who He gives it to? Why does that harm you? Why does that make you sad? Why are you losing sleep because Allah has given somebody else? Imagine that. You losing sleep because somebody else is prospering. A double shot. You didn't get the wealth and you're losing your sleep as well. Talha radiallahu ta'ala taught us, subhanAllah, in this one incident alone, forget about his generosity, when he sees that Allah has absolved Ubay ibn Ka'b of any wrong, he is happy. He is displaying joy. This is iman. This is what Allah wants from us. That when others are and what that means, there's a second element to that, is that when others are in difficulty, it hurts you as well. That's iman. When Allah gives others and they are happy, it makes you happy. But if something negative happens to somebody, that should affect you as well. And that's tied in with the global conflict today. We can't have a session without the imani taqaza. That when thousands of people are being targeted on a daily basis, well, thousands are an understatement, millions of people. When something that we can't imagine, like houses, wealth, electricity, gas, food, water, is more precious than any amount of wealth that you can give them. I heard right at the beginning of this onslaught, that a family was walking the streets and they had gold in their hands. And they're approaching people and saying, this is no value to us today. Give us some food, we'll give you all of this. All of it. This wealth is, what are we going to do with it if we can't eat? We're going to starve to death. So when there is this happening at the same time, then the taqaza, the need of a believer is to feel that. Is to be in pain because of that. Just like Talha radiallahu ta'ala showed us that when a mu'min is prosperous, be happy for them. But when they're in difficulty, be sad for them. And this is, I know we're speaking about a companion, but since we've touched the topic, this is a situation that's unparalleled to most of us who haven't experienced any of the wars in the past of this nature. It's compounding the fact that it also involves Masjid al-Aqsa. It also involves the third haram of the Muslims. That my continuous stressing discourse wherever I've spoken and whenever I've spoken is don't become tired of this. Don't let this become a fashion. Don't let this become a trend of a few social media uploads for a few weeks, or a few weeks that you don't drink a particular brand. Make it something that's real, that you feel, that pain that you feel. For us, unfortunately, it's until the war carries on. For them, like I've said so many times, those people that are going through what they're going through, there is no amount of therapy you can give them to make them recover. Simple. So for them, it's forever. Don't let it become something temporary for you. That the atrocities that are happening in front of our eyes, the absolute oppression that's taking place, the targeting of the innocent continuously, where in this decision to find what's termed as a terrorist organization, you've managed to kill over 5,000 children up to date. We're not talking the full numbers. 7,000 people are still buried under the rubble, unaccounted for. 7,000 people are still under the rubble. 5,000 that have been accounted for are children. Children who have no guilt in this world, and they have no guilt with Allah as well. Allah, they're not accountable. So don't let it become a sort of periodic thing that we've gone through and we've experienced, and 2 weeks later we're back to our normal selves. No. This Talha radiallahu ta'ala, this incident tells us that we should feel the happiness of others, and we should feel the pain of others as well. We should feel the joy of others, and we should become happy because of that, not sad. Someone buys a house, alhamdulillah, it's not something that you should lose sleep over. Someone's business is successful, alhamdulillah, it's not something that you should lose sleep over. Someone buys a nice car, alhamdulillah, it's not something you should lose sleep over. It's not something that should bother you. You should be happy for them. Make dua, Allah give them more. Make dua, Allah give them more, alhamdulillah. And at the same time, when there is hurt and there is pain and there is suffering, don't be of those who just simply puts the bed sheet over your head and goes to sleep, as if nothing's happening. That is real hunger. There is hunger. That is real thirst. That is real deprivation of sleep. That is real loss of life. How can you consider yourself, forget Muslim, a human, if you just simply turn aside and go to sleep? I'm not saying you can't sleep, but it should be inside you. It should be something that you think of. Yes, life does carry on, I understand that, but it should be a major part of your life. There shouldn't be a moment, even when you're doing what you're doing. You're busy, you're busy at work, but those thoughts should come out. Yeah, what's happening to these people? There shouldn't be a moment that it's not there. And that's what's called humanity. That's what differentiates us. Even animals have more sense of life than what we're displaying at the moment. They care more. So this incident of Talha and Ubay radiallahu ta'ala tells us that Iman, the mandate of Iman is that when someone is happy, be happy for them. Be happy for them that Allah has blessed them. Allah has given them. Why be sad? Why be upset by that? And so from the legacy of Talha radiallahu ta'ala, he was a humanitarian and he loved others to have and get. Selflessness. This is what Islam teaches us. Moving away from just thinking about yourself. Moving away from just worried about yourself and nobody else. Islam does not advocate for that. Islam asks you to be conscious about others. So why the hadith says, المؤمنون كرجل واحد إن اشتكى عينه اشتكى رأسه إن اشتكى رأسه اشتكى كله. So إن اشتكى عينه اشتكى كله إن اشتكى رأسه اشتكى كله. That the believing body, the ummah is like one body. If the head hurts, then the rest of the body hurts. If the eye hurts, the rest of the body hurts. Today, an entire section of the ummah is hurting, and it's made no difference to some of us. None whatsoever. So we need to come out of that, and this is from the Islamic mandate and the necessity of Islam. As I mentioned, there's much more to speak about. I've not even gone through half of what I want to, but inshallah the time is up. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives us the ability, the tawfiq, to see these qualities and not just go through them as entertainment, but Allah enable us to embody them in our lives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the love of Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as Sayyidina Talha radiallahu ta'ala displayed. The one thing that's mentioned in the books of Tariq is why, and I forgot to mention this, was Talha and Zubair radiallahu ta'ala anhu, why were they said that they would be from the neighbors of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam? So we will see when we speak about Zubair radiallahu ta'ala anhu, the sacrifices that he made. But in summary, and I'll continue with this next time. In summary, both Talha and Zubair defended Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You defend Allah and His Rasul, that doesn't go unnoticed by Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Talha displayed that level of sacrificial jazba that he said, my entire body, Ya Rasulullah, every element of it. That's why he became the neighbor of the Prophet. So we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah enable us to bring those sifat into our lives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us that love for the creation, that their happiness makes us happy. Allah take away the selfless or the selfish behavior that we have. Allah make us selfless individuals, where other people's prosperity does not hurt us, it makes us happy. Allah give us that iman, that mandate that He demands from us in the Sharia. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give me the understanding, all of you the understanding. Before we go upstairs inshallah for the food, if there's any questions inshallah, the sisters, you can give to Auntie, she will forward that to me. Any other questions that anybody may have inshallah, in the men's side, just raise your hands. They're just setting up upstairs, and then we'll make our way upstairs inshallah. If anybody has any questions inshallah, we can go through the questions. If there's any questions from the sister's side, please do send it through inshallah. And don't worry, the smell isn't here today, but the food is cooking. Alhamdulillah, that means that the kitchen renovations have been what we wanted, and the smell is not here, alhamdulillah. That was the objective. So don't worry, the food is there though. You don't need to worry about that. Any questions inshallah?
Question here.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
As Ramadan's coming up, there's a famous hadith of Talha regarding of the two men, one passing after the other.
So the hadith is actually of three individuals who the Prophet ﷺ, they came as guests to the Messenger ﷺ's house. And the hadith is that these three individuals, they came to the Messenger ﷺ as guests, and the Prophet ﷺ asked the companions who would host them. So Talha radiallahu anhu said, as he was a generous person, that I'll host them, and he took them home. And they spent a lot of time with Talha radiallahu anhu. Then one of them went out on an expedition and he was martyred. The other two still stayed in contact with Talha radiallahu anhu and stayed with him for a long time. And over a period of time, both of them went out in the path of Allah and they were martyred as well. But he had immense love for them, and he said, I would periodically see them in my dreams. And one occasion, he said, if we're speaking about the same hadith, this is. On one occasion, I saw all three of them, and I said, what's fair of you? And they said, Allah has granted us Jannah. But the one that died afterwards, he's going to Jannah first. Then the one that was martyred first, he's going last. So Talha radiallahu ta'ala says, the one that was martyred, he's going last, and the other ones that died afterwards, there's different narrations, but pretty much it doesn't make sense to me. So he says, I went to the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, Ya Rasulullah ﷺ, what's this? I've seen this in a dream, and the one that was martyred, I expected him to go straight into Jannah, but he's going after this person. The Prophet said, what's difficult to understand? The one who stayed alive longer has done more ibadah. He's worshipped for that much longer. He's worshipped Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he is now, because his account is building up, And in that time, he must have done a lot of things that are warranting Jannah. That's why he's going first. So it tells us that the longer we are on this world, on this earth, Allah allows us to build the Jannah, to get closer to Jannah. Every moment that you have on this earth should be taken as an opportunity to develop your relationship with Allah and get closer to Jannah. Any other questions? Yes. Oh, Mr. Hand. Yes.
You mentioned about somebody and being happy about when somebody does something good happens to others. Is there a dua from the Sunnah that you could do to try and make?
Anytime you make dua for others, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has appointed angels. And the angel responds that, oh Allah, accept his dua and give him the like in return. So if you make dua for the prosperity of others, so you see someone, let's say someone has reached a place in their employment that they didn't have, they've got a promotion. You say, Ya Allah, give him more, make him, get him at a higher place. The angels make dua that Allah ameen to that, and Allah give him that as well. You should always make dua in the absence of others, for them. Because effectively, it's making dua for yourself. There are certain things in the Sharia that if you do for others, or if you do something, though it doesn't seem like it, the benefit comes back to you. So this is one of them, when you make dua for somebody else. Because the angel makes dua to Allah, that Allah give that to him as well. Any other questions? No? Is it too hungry, or is it because we've been away for too long? Usually we have a lot of questions. And none from the sister side today. Interesting. Yes?
We've heard you narrate the stories of the other children of granted paradise. But this one, for some reason, seems to have been a little more emotional. Is there a particular reason?
I think just what's happening right now. Very, yeah. At the moment, it's... at the end of the day, I've said this in Jummah, at the end of the day, Allah is Allah. And we trust whatever Allah does. But that doesn't take away from the pain that you feel. It can't, as a human. So yeah, at the moment it's difficult. Yep.
When we heard about the close companion of Prophet,
So much.
they mostly are traders, and then we talk about happiness of others. But since last few centuries, in Islamic community, trading has become like antagonistic profession. We tend to look down on traders because of the thing you were saying earlier. Why?
So trading, tijara itself, the Prophet ﷺ has made dua for that. There's goodness in it. Unfortunately, and I'm not stereotyping, I'm just making a general comment. Unfortunately, Muslim traders are not very good people. So Muslim businessmen, not all, but a lot of them have developed very, very bad reputations. You speak to many people, and they say, even Muslims will say, I don't want to deal with Muslim business people. What does that tell you? So it's because we don't understand. The Prophet ﷺ taught us integrity, being truthful, being honest in business. But when a Muslim fails to do all of them, it reflects badly on Muslim business people. And I can give you example after example after example, where Muslims they literally say that Islam on one side, business is different. No. Islam and business, if you're a Muslim and you're doing business, Islam is part of that. But unfortunately, lots of Muslims, and again, I don't want to sound stereotypical, I'm not making generic statements, but lots of Muslims who do business are not very good Muslims when they do business. And that has a bad effect. Others think of that, others perceive that, and they make generic statements. If you want to learn the illegal aspects of business, then there's certain people that you can deal with and you'll learn all the illegal ways. Unfortunately, lots of them will be Muslims. To understand this, I give an example. When I was studying, I was once going home in a taxi with a few of my colleagues, meaning going home, we were going to the airport to fly back to Canada. And on the way to the airport, I got into sort of conversation with the taxi driver. And he was a young, probably in his mid-30s, but he was a very respectful, nice British man. And we were talking about religion, he was talking about, and he said, you know what, I like everything you say, but I'll never become a Muslim. So I said, that's fine, but I just want to understand why. He goes, because in my trade, I deal with Muslims. And it's unfortunate that on the Friday nights, the drunkards, the druggies, the ones that are taking home people they shouldn't take home are all Muslims. They're all Muhammad and Abdullahs. And because of that, I ask myself, do I really want to be a Muslim? So similarly with the context of business, there is barakah inside there. Do business if you can, but do it with Islamic principles and values. Honesty, integrity, not deceiving others, not conning other people, having something, you say something. How many times personally where I've gone into some sort of contract with somebody, word is said, oh, you trust my word. 2 days later, oh no, it's not written down, I didn't say this. You think to yourself that this is you as a Muslim? There's no truthfulness in your tongue? It's unfortunate. Yes.
I remember on that particular topic recently, I heard something about the Muslim traders of the past. And when the first person in the market, the trader, he would make his sale, he wouldn't accept the next customer. He'd send it on to one of his other traders in order so that they make a sale as well.
You find that very, very prominent in the Sahaba Kiram. There's a hadith in Fazailu's Sadaqat where it's mentioned that once some charity came to a companion's house in the form of food, and he passed it on to somebody else because he didn't need it. And that person thought to himself that I don't need it, let me give it, until it came back to that person's house who gave it in the first place. That ability to think of other people, that notion that if I have a business, I want other businesses that may be selling the same thing to do as well, it's absolutely lost. You think to yourself, how do I make sure he doesn't make any business? We've forgotten that rizq comes from Allah. Provisions come from Allah. We've forgotten that. And if I'm selling phones and somebody else is selling phones, I'm going to do my absolute best that nobody goes to him. Not realizing Allah has given me the risk, not that customer. We've forgotten that element.